These people wants to know how probably you see the significance of Pattanam, because you might have been closely observing it. It is something that came out of barefoot archaeology into a major research concern. So, having closely looking at in the larger subcontinent's perspective to look at the past, how do you think, what is the potential of Pattanam and how we should go further ahead?
Well, let me try and put it in a little bit of a context, in the sense that I see Pattanam as the kind of site that is introducing us to a new dimension of Indian history and archaeology, which is the dimension of now having to look at the Indian Ocean. It's not enough simply to talk about the subcontinent. You have to now look at the Indian Ocean and the kinds of communication and contacts that existed across the Indian Ocean, and also between smaller areas like West Asia and India, and then India and Southeast Asia and so on. So in a sense, sites like Pattanam, with the kind of international reach that they have, are extending the borders of the unit that is called India in terms of history and archaeology. I think that is one reason why it's very important. Secondly, what Pattanam has demonstrated is that when one is excavating what might be called a slightly exotic site, in the sense that it's not 100% only Indian, it's got people coming from elsewhere as well, it is very necessary to do a completely thorough excavation. Unfortunately, places like Arikamedu were touched and left and touched and left, and so the data that a site like that gives us is not nearly as fulsome and significant as the data that a site like Pattanam is giving us, because of the fact that it is being excavated in a much fuller way than there's that. And then the third aspect, of course, which I think is very important for the way in which archaeology is done, which is that as you begin to get sites where there have been other cultures that have come in, and even if they haven't been dominant but have simply participated in the activities of the site, it is necessary for Indian archaeologists to be familiar with those other cultures. Now here you had a prime example of cultures from the Eastern Mediterranean with a Roman linkage coming in, interested in the site, active in the site, really in a sense creating a whole body of reasons for why the site became important. And we don't have a single Roman archaeologist in India. And yet we keep talking about this. Similarly, when it comes to Arab trade in the 7th, 8th centuries, the Arabs come and settle down. There is intense trade with the Arabian Peninsula, with the Horn of Africa, later on with East Africa. We have no specialists. So obviously we have to import people like that. And I think one of the really impressive things about Pattanam was that you people didn't hesitate to invite the specialists to come in. And obviously there was something very important there, because the specialists had not just come in and fiddled around and gone back. They stayed put, they worked there, they worked with you, and the results are really extremely impressive. And so, people who sit down and say, as some people say, that, oh, these sites are simply attracting foreign archaeologists, and the Indian archaeologists are doing nothing. This is really a load of nonsense, because it is very important at sites like these for Indian archaeologists to work together with archaeologists who are specialists in that region, both to learn and also to be able, next time round, to do the excavation themselves. I mean, the kind of expertise that you have got, for example, on your amphora shirts, you would never have got if you hadn't invited people from European centres, British Museum and so on, who are experts on these objects. And just think about the amount that we have learnt as a result of their expertise and their work on this material.
In a lighter vein, there is a lot of public attention to the question whether this is Busiris or not. People want to glorify, some people want to say no. But we used to keep academic distance. But I used to wonder how you felt it, whether...
Well, you can't be 100% certain unless you have that clinching evidence. And that clinching evidence at the moment isn't there. Everything seems to point to this perhaps being the place that is being mentioned. One would like to think that it is that place. It seems to have all the background and the qualifications to be able to be identified with Osiris. But we are still waiting for that one little, pin that will pin the identity together.
And a more academic question, it would be, the state is a constant aspect that worries many of the social scientists in terms of looking at the archaeological data that was coming, because there is already a lot of given knowledge that we had a society which was not equipped to have long-distance trade, because we don't have the social organization of a state, trade guilds, things like that. So, was it something that was happening in isolation, or how you see the study of state and polity of the times? What is the new perspective that demands?
I think that this question raises another question, which is that is state organized trade the only kind of trade you can have? This is a very fundamental question for early societies, because many early societies do not have a strong state organization. That comes later. Does that therefore eliminate the possibility of trading links? Or do we have to look at the pattern of trade as being somehow different? That the pattern of trade in itself is based on small decentralized groups and not on a large kingdom controlling the trade. And I think that it is a legitimate question that needs to be asked when you're excavating a site like that.
In your opening remarks, you said when you look at the oceans, see, it's interesting to note that much conquests or best confrontations were not happening in the sea, but mostly what was happening was trade. Do you think it was one of the most secular and civilizing influences in human history in terms of trade, and we became territorial, we became land-centered?
Well, it was certainly, from the point of view of becoming territorial, yes, obviously, there was no territory to be controlled. And from the point of view of trade, I think what it made us, the communities that were involved in this trade certainly became much more cosmopolitan. No question. Much more cosmopolitan. Now, whether in fact this led to conflicts with their hinterland communities that were more conservative and sort of straitjacketed, I don't know. But certainly I think that a lot, and this was what I meant when I said that, civilization can no longer be seen as self-contained, because there are all these points at which you have major cosmopolitan centers. And they're also impacting the civilization of the hinterland. So it has an effect in the sense that you have to reconsider this whole notion of these monolithic civilizations that we were brought up with.
You are talking in the background of the first major exhibition that happened in the National Capital, And these people are actually documenting that. It is for this we are talking also. So what do you feel? What is its...
I think it's been a very successful exhibition. Partly, of course, because it's not the usual thing where you take 4 walls and you put objects up against each wall and say that's an exhibition. You've taken the trouble to break it up into units, you've taken the trouble to display the objects differently. Your display of potsherds and pottery and the reconstruction of the pottery, so that the ordinary person who's not an archaeologist, when he or she comes in, they understand that these sherds actually mount up to being an object which looks like this. And also the whole display of small items, as they are called in archaeology. No, I think it's been, and that map is superb. The map is superb, really.
The oldest maps.
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
So,
and it gives you such a good idea of what were the kinds of navigational things people worked with through the ages. I mean, the map is relatively late, but it's not a modern map, and it has an immense interest.
Thank you, ma'am.